Welcome back to the channel. So last time we machined out this bracket here for the push rod points and cutout system, and we made this bandsaw blade piece here that's going to get soldered in there, and we cut this vertical piece here, and we cut this tungsten piece off of an electrode that we're going to use for the points. So now we're going to continue on putting this together. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is solder this hacksaw blade into this bracket, and then once we get that soldered in there, we can go ahead and drill the holes out through there for that. Actually, it's mounted this way. So I'll get that cleaned up and get it fluxed and get that soldered in there, get those holes drilled, and then we can transfer those holes to our push rod here, and then go ahead and drill and tap those out and get this piece mounted on. But then we also need to solder the points to this vertical piece here. So I did go ahead, I've got the hole drilled in the top here for the spring. Then last time we was talking about this little pip mark that it left on there when I cut it off with the Dremel cutoff wheel in the lathe. So I did go ahead and make just a little center punch mark there with a center drill, and that's going to work out good to put the point, a little pip mark into there, and that will hold it good and secure, so we can put a little bit of pressure down on it, and then we'll get that fluxed and get that soldered on there. And then this piece will also get soldered onto the end of this bracket here in the vertical position like that. We'll mark where it goes. There's a certain position that it needs to go into. So I've got a lot of soldering to do. I'm going to try a different torch this time. I've generally used just use my MAP gas torch, but it does have a very large flame. It is hot, which I am using silver solder, but I'm going to try, I've got a different torch that actually uses propane. You can use propane or MAP gas, and it mixes oxygen with it. You can adjust it, and I can get a smaller flame with that. So we're going to actually try that torch this time to solder it, just to see if we can concentrate the heat in a little bit tighter area. So we'll get this stuff cleaned up, fluxed, and then get it secured down to where it won't move around on us, and then get the soldering this up. And then once that's done, I want to work on this, the other part of the points. It's this bracket here, the engine base points. So there's it doesn't say aluminum or steel. I've got a piece of aluminum angle bracket here that I'm going to use to mount this to, and then this needs to be, it says red fiber or Bakelite, but I've got a piece of Delrin that I'm going to make this piece out of. And then this piece in the middle is 3/16. We'll just use some 3/16 drill rod and then turn it down, and there's a spring that goes in here, so the piece of Delrin will get counterbored with a spring, and then get threaded on the end here for 2 nuts where the wire will attach to. And then the same thing, I'm going to just put a center drill in the end there where we can put the point on the end of that, and then solder that onto the end of that. So we'll get this bracket made up, get the holes drilled in it, and then drilled and tapped here to mount this to the Delrin to the bottom of the bracket. And then I've got a pretty large piece of Delrin here that I can cut a chunk off of to make that. It needs to be something that's insulated. It needs to be insulated from the rest of the engine. And then I've got this random piece of aluminum channel here that we can cut out and cut us a bracket out of to put on there. And then this will actually mount here on the side of the engine, and then that point that's on the end of that will line up with this point here, and that will make the point system, so when that breaks, that will fire the ignition. So we'll get this all soldered up and get all this machined out, and then we'll look at mounting it onto here. There's no dimensions in the plans that I can find of where to mount it to, so I think we're just going to have to line it up with the other point there, and then we'll mark our holes, and then it'll get 2 holes drilled and tapped actually through this main casting here. They'll get that bracket mounted onto there for the points. Well, that didn't go according to plan. So I got the hacksaw blade soldered on there, and that went okay. I got that all cleaned up, and then went to drill the holes through there and got the first hole drilled fine, and then was drilling the second hole, and then the hacksaw blade came loose and it messed the hacksaw blade up. So I'll have to cut a new hacksaw blade and then solder that in there again. I don't particularly like how that torch was working, so I did switch, or for next time I am going to switch back to the MAP gas torch and then try that. And I think the hacksaw blade, it did lift just a little bit. There was a lot of solder built up underneath there, but sometimes it goes good and sometimes it doesn't. So we'll have to cut a new blade and then get that soldered again. But this piece is still good. The points, I tried soldering also, and for the life of me, could not get the solder to stick to this tungsten. I'm pretty sure that you can silver solder. I'm using silver solder, that you can silver solder tungsten, but I could not get it to stick. It would stick to the drill rod and stuck to it some, but I tried flexing it and putting more heat on it and it just wouldn't. So then I finally just stuck it down there by itself, cleaned it up, flexed it, and then solder just would not stick to it. So we're gonna have to do something different there. Like I said, I've got a set of points. I just got to find them from a lawnmower. So we'll get those and then desolder that. And then we'll solder, because I have used those before, we'll solder that on here and then get this piece soldered on here. So we'll have to revisit that. And I started on the bracket here. I've got the piece of aluminum cut out and machined to size, and then the piece of Delrin cut out and machined to size. And then there still needs to be some holes drilled in here, so this will get bolted in from the bottom to this bracket here, and then we'll get bolted to the side here somewhere once we figure out where that is. This still gets a hole drilled through it, and then a counter bore, and then our piece of drill rod with the point on it, and then there's a spring in here, and then it'll get threaded back here in the back for 2 nuts. So this will be like a plunger inside of there, and that'll be the other side of the points. So that is okay. This we'll have to redo, find something different there on those. And going to be a short video this week. Been a busy week. I blew up my lawnmower, broke the connecting rod in my riding lawnmower, so I've been working on that. Had a tree fall in the yard, been working on that. So a lot of other stuff going on, so not as much time to machine on everything this week. But we'll get back at it next week and then start working on this and getting it fixed and getting the brackets and hopefully get this points and cutout system finished up so that we can move on to the arm here that actually latches this in and out. So thanks for watching.